We all know that this time of the year in Oklahoma, things can move pretty rapidly, particularly as we look at changes in the weather. And as we have a fast-moving front that's just come through on us, it even reminds us that fall is here, and it's a good time to plant trees. If you're looking for some choices for trees in your landscape, then don't overlook the pines, because now is a good time to plant them. We're out at Quality Plants in Stillwater today, visiting with Gary Seitz, owner and manager of Quality Plants. And Gary, we appreciate again the opportunity to be out here and talk to you about fall planting in general, and particularly with the pines, because I know this is a good choice for us this time of the year.
Well, you're right, Ray. You know, while the soil temperature is still warm, there will be plenty of time to get some root growth to get these trees established by the time really cold weather gets here. But I find that the pines can be planted in the fall and you have very good success.
Because of course you don't run into usually these heavy winds we get in the spring, or the hot temperatures before the roots get established. So it is a good time
like in
to
July and
establish.
August.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I know that there's many pines we can choose here in Oklahoma, but the ones that we're looking at now are those that are adapted throughout most of the state, and there's some differences in these. Tell me a little bit about some of these pines that we're looking at here, Gary.
Well, this one right here is the Japanese black pine. It's a very fast-growing pine, perhaps the fastest growing of all the pines. As a result of its fast growth, though, sometimes it has an asymmetrical shape. Gives you more of a Japanese garden kind of shape.
But that irregular growth pattern is an advantage in some cases, because it gives a little character to the landscape.
That's true. And you know, the 3 to 4 feet of growth per year is quite astonishing.
And I know this one grows on a wide range of soils. It responds really to good cultural conditions, but it also do pretty good even if you neglect it somewhat.
Even on heavy clay soils, we'll find that this tree survives well.
And Gary, I've got this one in my own landscape. The thing I like about it, because I also have some of these other pines, is that we find that it is less susceptible to pine tip moth damage than some of the others. And you may get it, but still it's less susceptible than some of these other pines here.
Well, I like they have a big, strong white, you know, candle, so maybe that's why.
Maybe it is.
Strong.
What are these others here now?
This is the slash pine. It's a much longer needle, and again, this is a very rapid growing pine tree, so you know, get a lot of interior branching and then a whirl of side branches, and then a lot of height, and overall height is achieved by stretching this middle part. The small branches in through here don't grow as quickly, so they get a real stately, upright shape. Again, real good for heavy clay.
Right, and also does well on wet soils, but also poor, gravelly, rocky soils like the southeastern part of the state has.
Yeah. But a nice tree for the landscape, especially if you have a open to the north to your home and you want to create some screen there. This is a fast-growing to give you that protection of winter.
That's an attractive one there too. This looks like the pine's supposed to look.
Yeah, this is the Loblolly Pine, and that's similar to all the pines that you see in the background here at Quality Plants. The Loblolly Pine is native to our area into eastern Oklahoma, Arkansas, and into Texas, so you can be sure that they'll grow well in our poor soils.
You know what I like about the Loblolly Pine and the slash pine is that I guess I'm familiar with them coming from eastern and southeastern Oklahoma, and these are the pines that are used, particularly the slash pine, they're used a lot for reforestation down there. And as a young tree, they make a nice ornamental tree, but as they get older, they make a nice tree for an overstory tree, for azaleas and dogwoods, or also for a background and a screen, and also a nice habitat for wildlife.
I like to see something green in the middle of winter.
I do too, and this is a good point. These little trees here are just another option of sizes to buy, I guess.
Pick one of those up. This is a little 1-gallon size. This is a Virginia pine. These are sometimes used as the Christmas tree, ball and burlap, sold at Christmas time to be used in the house as a Christmas tree and then later planted out and used in your landscape. But these little 1-gallon guys are just 1 year old, so they haven't put on as much growth as these 3 to 5 year old trees that we've been looking at.
And I've noticed now you've got trees in the 5-gallon containers, the 1-gallon containers, you've got some ball and burlap trees. All these choices are good for fall planting, and it just depends on really what a person wants.
You know, how much their budget would allow them to spend.
And well, Gary, very quickly now I want to thank you for allowing us to come out and take a look at these trees and in the condition they're in the containers. And now I think it would be really interesting to our growers if we went and looked at some in a landscape setting, how some of these trees may look after they've been in the landscape for 6, 8, or 10 years. So we're going to do that now.
All right, that's great.
Now, when you're choosing trees or any plants for the landscape for that matter, it's important to know what these are going to look like a few years down the road. And you're going to find that these pine trees that we've been talking about are going to look a little bit different when you have them in the landscape for 8 or 10 years. For example, here we're looking at one of the slash pines, and this one has about 8 or 10 years growth on it. And you can see now that it's beginning to lose these lower limbs because of the shading effect. And as this tree gets older, it's going to continue to do that. And so if you're going to choose the slash pine, you'll probably want to plant these fairly close together so you can get a clump effect, because they make a nice overstory or canopy tree with the lower part of the tree being bare within a few years. And then as we go on up and look at some of these other trees, the Japanese black pine, for example, you can note the real irregular growth habit of that tree, and it continues to have this irregular growth habit. This tree responds well to pruning and training, but if you want the natural form, I would suggest you let it grow however it wants to. And for example, and then again, look at this Japanese black pine. It's a good example of this natural needle drop that Sue talked about a little earlier that we see this time of the year on our pine trees. Over here we have a pine tree that we haven't talked about yet, but this is the Scotch pine. It makes an excellent pine for a specimen plant in the landscape, or also when planted in a hedgerow for a windbreak. This is a real popular Christmas tree that we find here in Oklahoma at Christmas time, and it has some of the very typical conical shape of the Christmas tree, as well as the nice dark green and very, very coarse foliage on it. One of the interesting things about these trees is that if we look at the slash pine, the Japanese black pine, and this Scotch pine, these are all about the same age, but you notice the real difference in the growth habit of these trees. The Scotch pine grows much slower. It has a small candle growth, and as a result you get a much more compact, dense tree that is produced. But if you look at these other trees, they're more rapidly growing. As Gary mentioned, you get a real significant amount of candle growth each year. It's on this tree, so you get a more open and irregular shape. Well, we've got some other trees I think that would be interesting to spend some time to look at, but we're running out of time here today on Oklahoma Gardening. But I would encourage you to go out and visit with your local garden center. The other garden centers, much like Quality Plants where we were just at, have a wide selection of trees this time of the year. You'll want to go out and look at those and visit with these folks, because they can give you some good tips on planting.